Good evening. It is 5:30 PM on Tuesday, December 6th, 2022, and this regular meeting of the Sandpoint Planning and Zoning Commission is now called to order in council chambers at City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street, Sandpoint, Idaho. For the record, I am Chairman John Hastings presiding. Also present are Commissioners Mo Stunkel, Luke Ahmet, Ben McGran, and Amelia Boyd attending remotely. We will now recite the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone will please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Also, just as a notice, Commissioner Polito has moved outside of city limits, and so he has resigned his position. And are there any other general announcements from commissioners and or city staff?
Mr. Chairman, just a reminder, if commissioners are interested, tomorrow night is the follow-up Leland presentation at City Council. And then also just wanted to let you know, we do have a public hearing scheduled for the 20th. So I need to be sure we have a quorum. If you, I know, Ben, you are out, correct?
Correct.
If you cannot make it, please let me know as soon as possible.
And just for general information too, do we have a timeline on the replacement of or the applications for new commissioners?
I know the request for applications went out. I know we have at least one new one in, but other than that, I don't, but I'll follow up.
Do they often go back? Does the mayor go back to look at prior applications?
He did, but we interviewed, I think, everyone who was in the queue from the previous January, the last time.
Okay.
So I think we were probably starting with a fresh batch.
Okay, just curious. Any other announcements? Okay. Next on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes from the last meeting. I will entertain a motion to approve minutes from November 1st, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Can we, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, aye. Is that okay? It's unanimous consent. We don't have to do a roll call. Is that cool? Next item on the agenda this evening is review of two draft comprehensive plan chapters, the public facilities, utilities and services, and the housing and neighborhoods. And I will now yield the floor to City Planner Amy Tweeten for an overview of the chapter drafts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the first one, although it's not in order, chapter 8 is the public facilities, utilities and services. So this is the first chapter draft being reviewed. You'll notice we've called it, I think, 2A because it went through some staff revisions as well. Again, the chapter has background information on city utilities, third-party utilities and services, facilities that are sites and buildings for operations and economic development, as well as services that aren't discussed elsewhere. We talk a lot about, obviously streets and multimodal, and we talk about parks and recreation and other chapters. So these are public services that aren't discussed in those chapters. And then the goals and objectives are categorized into 6 categories: utilities and infrastructure, education, lifelong learning, solid waste, public safety, public health, and responsive government. And let's see, I'll just look the chapter. So again, the background information on the water utility, the wastewater utility, the stormwater management. We don't have a utility, but we are responsible for managing stormwater. And then information on city facilities, city hall, the maintenance facility, the parking lot, community hall, and then some flex buildings the city owns on Airport Way. And then some of these others are just, these are requirements by state law of that you incorporate. One is power plants and utility transmission corridors. And then discussion of our fiber utility, which is clearly not something every municipality has, and we are fortunate to have. Then services, public safety, and then health and welfare. A lot of this is not necessarily public services, but services in the community important to the public. Most of them are private unless it is county provided or regionally provided facilities. And then education, literacy, just information on the school district, as well as through the engagement process, there was a lot of discussion on offering lifelong learning. And then I know the commission has also discussed the interest in getting promoting higher education or even trade training, and just using that as promoting that for economic development purposes.
Is that something, may I ask a question? Is that something that would be worth specifically mentioning in here? Encouraging technical facility of some sort?
I think it's in here, and if it isn't, we can add it here.
I
but
didn't
think we
notice it when I was reading it, but
I think we also might have touched on it in economic development.
okay.
But having it both places is perfectly
Yeah.
fine.
Okay.
So then just the goals and objectives, utilities and infrastructure, the long-term utility and infrastructure needs of Sandpoint's existing and future residents, businesses, and visitors are met. Objectives: assure city infrastructure has sufficient capacity to meet the community's long-term needs. Assess regional water utility opportunities that address current and forecasted demand, provide cost savings, and ensure adequate fire flow. Collaborate and consider partnership opportunities with other governmental agencies and service providers to provide the most cost-effective, reliable, and efficient utilities and infrastructure to all residents and businesses. Coordinate with utility providers on acceptable site locations for their future facilities to avoid negative impacts to the community. Continue to improve broadband service, access, reliability, affordability, and capacity within the city. Explore and encourage use of renewable energy sources such as solar and wind. Strategically plan for the maintenance, replacement, and expansion of aging utilities and infrastructure, and work with utility providers to move overhead power lines and related infrastructure underground as feasible. For the goal of education, lifelong learning, there's kind of two subcategories in this, and these were their own goals, but I combined them, and that's why it kind of jumps from goal 2 to goal 4, because this was 2, so I've changed the numbering. I apologize. But they both fall under education and lifelong learning. So the first is educational institutions are partners in long-range planning. Continue to engage with the Pender School District and other educational institutions to consider impacts on school facilities, capacity, and infrastructure when making land use decisions. Develop partnerships with the educational community to share resources and facilities where practical, and strengthen and expand relationships with schools in our community to provide for safe, appealing, and convenient multimodal routes to school. And then a diverse range of educational opportunities that continues lifelong learning is available. Partner with educational institutions, nonprofits, and other community-based organizations to provide a variety of educational opportunities for all stages of life. Encourage educational institutions to develop programs that will result in local employment opportunities for graduates. Assist in the recruitment of local higher education and career training institutions. coordinate with and assist local schools and education providers to prepare students for the workforce, and continue to coordinate facilities, materials, and continuing education programs with the public library and local and regional educational institutions. So I think that C, is that getting to,
D is close, yes.
is there something you want to add or be more specific there?
Yes, let's see, for me, I'm thinking of coordinating just local school district ed providers to provide workforce training. Rather than to prepare, I mean, and maybe that's in there, but when I see prepare students for workforce, it's a little vague. I don't know, but to actually provide workforce training through career and or technical programs.
To provide workforce training is
Correct.
to prepare students for the workplace.
Something like that.
Okay.
Any other thoughts?
Are you looking to add something around technical training? or-
Well, and that's what workforce training
Right.
would mean. But yes, that's what I'm thinking, is that there's such a need for the trades in this community. It would be nice if we had a facility here that was training our electricians and plumbers and et cetera.
Right.
Let's see. It doesn't really flow when we have our own category on solid waste, but I don't know.
No pun intended? No.
Just kind of does not, but I guess it could go in another category, but the goal is to reduce the amount of solid waste generated in the city, develop and support local markets for recycled materials and products, work with Bonner County and adjacent communities to improve recycling, composting, and hazardous waste disposal resources, and distribute information about waste reduction, common recycling errors and myths, composting at home, hard to recycle items, and access to disposal facilities.
Is there any current news on that topic?
Is there any current what?
Like, is there any new developments on any kind of recycling program in the county or the city?
Not
As
Not
far,
that I'm aware of.
yeah, as far as I know, it's like just gone. Because
Recycling?
yeah,
City has recycling.
Recycling.
Well, we contract with Waste Management for recycling.
no,
But it is interesting because the community I came from, the county was a leader in recycling, and they really, I mean, they ended up with this huge, I mean, they really took on composting, recycling. Did a really incredible job.
I had a question. I wasn't sure if you wanted to go through the entirety before we got to goals and objectives, but when we're looking at these, since we're on goal 4, solid waste,
Mhm.
and just to start with, and actually I would say for all of these goals and objectives, for example, the amount of solid waste generated in the city is reduced. If it's a goal, is the goal not to reduce? So you have the action first, because depending on perspective, and I found recently through much interactions with people about comprehensive plans that there's about, with 5 people, you can have 8 different opinions. And clarity is useful. So is the goal to reduce the amount, or as I read it, I could also see, well, we have the amount of solid waste generated in the city is reduced. We're done. So I'm curious about language and intent, because to go back specifically to D in regards to coordinate with utility providers on acceptable site locations for their future facilities to avoid negative impacts to the community. Who gets to say what's a negative impact to the community? So why are we not just, for that one specifically, unless we want to take time to define negative impact, could we not just coordinate with utility providers on acceptable site locations for their future facilities? Because when we go negative or positive, we're starting to add bias, and I'm curious, is it my negative or is it Mo's negative? Whose negative is it?
Well, back to, I think, your first comment of, because you're right, people look at goals differently. The way they're all worded in this document, it's like, it's an end state. Did you meet this goal? Did you reduce solid waste in the community or didn't you? So that goal is you're reducing it, so that the amount of solid waste is reduced, instead of saying the goal being reduce solid waste in the community. It's going to the end state is the goal. So that's actually how all the goals are worded throughout.
I'll just say for myself, that's confusing. So, but
I agree. I think it's a little vague and it kind of leaves the door open for almost no action. Because number one, if it's a goal, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to meet it. So it gives us that leeway to just say, we didn't get there. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I do think solid waste is a big deal now. And I think it's going to be a bigger deal. Could the plan be, would it be wrong for the plan to say the city is going to reduce how much solid waste it generates?
You mean just the city as the governmental agency,
Just some,
instead of trying to encourage residents to also.
yeah, because I feel like that's something that this document could have an effect on, like directly, like there could be resolutions
Mhm.
that would come out of this. And with the residents of the city, that's a battle. Like people are gonna either want to do it or not want to do it. And it could take much more than this to really have any effect. But I think the city itself could have a real direct impact on something they have a lot more, that this document could provoke more along that line. And it could be like a leader of, hey, the city is able to do this. Here's how the city did it. People who live in the city could do it too, or take part in the same kind of actions. Maybe since the city is invested in it, then now the citizens also have that ability to go down that route too.
So what you're saying, so the city acts as the role model. We say, we demonstrate, this is how, we track this, we've done this action, and now we're broadening it to the community, and this is how we can bring the community in. That's all possible, because remember, these are just your goal and objective statements, but when you get into implementation, what's the implementation action to get to this goal? So is it develop a waste reduction city for municipal operations? That's much more specific, and that is something you put into implementation. You'd say, we want to accomplish that in the next 5 years. And then maybe the 5 years after that, that gets broadened community wide.
Well, to your point, could that be implemented into this? Since this document is typically around a 10-year document, would it be wild to say in the next 5 years or before this document is updated next time or revised, that there's a goal, here's a goal instead of just the goal of reducing? Could the goal have some sort of parameters to it maybe? I mean, I know it's a little bit trendy right now to, say we're going to reduce our footprint and, our energy. But I don't know, just my thoughts.
I mean, if you want more specific objectives, we can. But again, because there is the whole next step of now, again, goals and objectives are very broad, and how do you actually get there will be part of the plan. That's the whole implementation.
Well, that's your policy piece. So your goals just drive the policies. You'll have a policy that marries with every goal in this same plan.
Mhm.
So I think your specifics are probably more suited for the policy section.
And is that implementation and policy section under construction, or where is that? Or is this got to get done before that?
Yes.
I don't,
Yeah, because it comes from, yeah, this is setting the framework, and then even through the process, and if it was at engagement sessions or whatever, people have actually given, like, the city should do this, and it's a very specific action that may tie to one of these broader statements. So I know that Logan Simpson has been tracking all of those and kind of starting to build out the implementation tools.
Mr. Chairman, can we go back, please, since did you want to make your entire presentation before we start addressing notes? How would you like to do that so we aren't interrupting? I'm comfortable whichever directions you give.
Go ahead. We can go back. That's fine.
I think step by step is better.
So as we go along.
As we go along,
So
Okay.
if I may, since we're relatively close, back to goal 1, utilities and infrastructure, I'd like to ask the other commissioners specifically in regards to D.
oh,
And this
The
is the
negative
negative impacts to the community. What are thoughts about? Well, I only want positive impacts to the community personally. Why is our goal not to just coordinate with utility providers on acceptable site locations for their future facilities? Period.
I like the word negative, and here's why. If it ended right after coordinating with these agencies, whatever plan they came up with, they can say we've accomplished our objective, we coordinated, even if nobody likes it. But if we have a statement like that, we have a look at it. The citizens have a look at it, and finally, city council has a look at it. And we've seen so many things that come with us, and they have both positive and negative. So this doesn't say there can't be any negative
Could we add positive then?
to
Well,
facilities to.
to be very clear, I have an
Yes.
issue with negative only because
Gotcha.
one man's negative is another man's positive.
And everything is going to have both positive and negative. I mean, almost everything is going to.
But what can very potentially happen is in future hearings, there will be citizens can come forward and say, this is a negative impact according to goal D of utility.
Why would you want a goal that says you want to identify locations that are what do you want to say, avoid positive and negative
No.
impacts? You want to
Well,
avoid.
It says, well, it says coordinate with utility providers on acceptable site locations for their future facilities for positive and to consider.
But it says to avoid negative impacts to the community.
But from my perspective, what you're doing is you're opening up a conversation. It's upset. Oh, there's going to be a power line that is now in line with my view. So that's a negative impact for one particular block. However, that power transmission or that cell tower might increase broadband to a previously unreached, just using that as a random example, because I've heard a lot of significant broadband conversation about removing broadband towers. But then it depends upon perspective. If we're adding opportunities for seniors, which comes later, or we're adding educational opportunities for people, without defining what is a negative impact to the community, I find that very challenging to know.
What if you change it to minimize negative impacts?
And there also could be a word earlier in that to work with providers on favorable site locations for future facilities and minimize negative.
Positive site locations.
Just
That's,
take off.
well, but I don't know, positive to me doesn't seem to fit there, but favorable does, but
Well, just take out acceptables, just change it to coordinate with utility providers on site locations for future facilities to minimize that, or that minimize negative impacts.
How about just avoid impacts?
If you guys decide to try to
Right,
wordsmith
right.
every line in
I
this
know.
document, you're gonna be here till.
well, and
I'm not
I
trying
concur.
everyone,
You're right.
but this negative one in regards to utilities, when,
Just end it at facilities and cross out the rest.
yes,
But then it's not a goal, it's just a statement.
Yeah, and I don't like that, stopping it there personally.
You have, what is your goal with relationship to the location of utility facilities.
Well, the goal says to provide acceptable site locations, so that would be the goal, acceptable.
And then you'd have the same argument that some will say, well, that's not acceptable to me. It may be
It's to
acceptable
meet the
you, but-
long-term utility and infrastructure needs of Sandpoint's existing and future residents. And then you have your subcomponents, which to coordinate with through either planning or zoning or the city council to add that in.
Well, you could just cross out D entirely. You don't have to have it in there.
I'm great with that as well.
I mean, realistically, isn't that going to be happening anyway? The D, when a utility provider wants to put up a tower or something like that, there's a process where people have a chance to complain about it or support it.
Have a chance to complain about everything all day, every day.
And that's why there's multiple layers of where those complaints are heard and weighed. There's always negatives, there's always positives. And we take votes on that, and then the city council takes votes on that. So I think it's nice to have there so that people can, the citizenry can say, this has a negative impact on me, therefore I want you to reconsider it. That doesn't mean they can't do it. That means me waiting beside, yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, there's a 3-story apartment building in the middle of 1-story homes. Negatively impact a lot of people. Yes, did we vote to do that? Many of us. So just because it's in there saying it's a negative impact doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
This is up to us if it's negative.
Pardon?
It's kind of up to us if it's actually is a negative.
And other people. It's up to us, it's up to city council, and it's up to the citizens of Sandpoint to make that determination.
Well, and that, on things like power providers, you don't have a lot to say. The federal government will tell you what's going to happen. So it may be worth striking this one.
I think just strike D entirely.
And does that any way have a negative impact? Does that in any way have a negative impact on the implementation piece that would be coming later that you see, that you're aware of?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Okay. Then we can do that.
Yeah, I think it's okay if it's gone.
Yeah, no, that's. It will be addressed in other ways.
Is you-
I'm waiting until, no, I'm good on this page now. Thank you.
Okay.
What, I had one other thing that I thought might be a worthwhile goal, and was back in wastewater, or, I don't know, maybe it wasn't wastewater, but, groundwater management or storm flow management, stormwater management.
Mhm.
And that would be to have a goal to reduce the amount of surface flow by encouraging the use of pervious surfaces.
It's a good one.
Mhm.
And achievable.
And
Yeah,
achievable.
very
Like it.
easy.
And it's a great example of also how it can drive specific
Yeah.
policies, which then lead right into code. I mean, that's just a great example.
So that will be a new objective under goal 1, correct? Let's see, where were we?
We were on solid waste.
Solid waste, that's right.
And you're right, it didn't flow very well.
Well, and again, so when you look at the solid waste one, there's actually, some of these are pretty specific. Some of these are actually could be
Mhm.
action items. Because distributing information is a very specific,
Right.
educating the public
It is.
essentially. Okay, so public safety is our next.
Before we move on,
Yes.
one of the goal, I'm curious to see what other commissioners might think on this, is most of this, at least my take on looking at the stuff there is what to do with solid waste after it's been generated. Is it worth having a goal to reduce solid waste before it is generated?
Can you give an example?
Yeah, but it's a hot topic. I mean, the one that I'm obviously thinking of is the city of Sandpoint. And I don't know how this would work because of state law, but the city of Sandpoint at one point was trying to eliminate the use of plastic grocery bags.
Mhm.
That passed through city council, if I'm not mistaken. But then the state of Idaho passed a law that said cities can't do that because they're pro-plastic or whatever. But my point is there a way that we could say, rather than having this stuff be generated and we either recycle of it or dispose of it properly, could there be a goal to how we reduce the amount? And I don't know how specific that would be. I don't know what the implementation would be. I'm just saying it's an idea.
It's just a goal.
Right, it's a goal to reduce the amount of, that's kind of already in there,
It's
but I don't know.
right.
The orientation of this is what to do after it's been used. My point is there a way to prevent that from happening, such as not allowing plastic bags? I know that we can't do that here, but are there other examples?
I don't think that the comp plan would be the mechanism. It would be the policy.
Well, but the policy comes from the comp plan, right?
Well, from I mean, C, distribute information about waste reduction, right? There could be an initiative to go out and say, hey, bring your
That's- I
own
suppose
shopping
that's
bag.
good. I
to
suppose
the-"
it's in there. I suppose that's well enough in there. Okay. Let's move on.
I like where you're going though.
Would that be called a pre-consumer solid waste?
Right, that's exactly what it is. That's actually a good term to use.
We just made that up.
Consumer.
Okay, public safety, a safe environment for the people of Sandpoint is created through effective fire, police, and emergency response services. Ensure the capability to direct, control, and coordinate emergency response and recovery operations. Ensure that quality fire protection, rescue, and emergency medical services are provided within Sandpoint. Minimize duplication of services by coordinating fire, EMS, and police services across jurisdictions. Work with neighboring jurisdictions to create strong local wildfire planning. Use regional partnerships, emergency planning, and shared resources to reduce loss of life and property from hazards. And then crime prevention was its own goal, but I think it falls under public safety. Crime prevention principles are incorporated into community planning and service delivery. Support crime prevention and risk reduction through environmental design and resource sharing with other cities and citizen assistance. Foster partnerships between crime prevention practitioners, community planners, architects, and public safety and health agencies. Increase knowledge and practice of crime prevention through environmental design in community planning and code enforcement, and maintain active code enforcement programs to serve as a crime prevention tool. Public health, Sandpoint is a multi-generational city with exceptional public health resources and assistance programs to support residents of all ages. Support access to a wide range of high-quality healthcare, including emergency services, primary home, hospice, and mental health care within the community. Develop partnerships with the healthcare community to collaborate and share resources where practical. Provide assistance as applicable to agencies and organizations working to address mental health, addiction, and homelessness. Collaborate with providers to support community access to healthy, nutritious food. Remove barriers to child and elder care access, and support walkable and bikeable neighborhoods in site planning and zoning decisions to positively affect population health over the long term.
What does E mean?
Sorry?
What does E mean in reference to the city and what the city's role is? So which department of the city is going to remove barriers to child and elder care access?
Zoning.
Through zoning?
There could be, maybe you only allow childcare in certain areas. So it's zoning can play into it for sure. But the childcare issues are multifaceted like housing is. I mean, there's state regulations, there's lack of providers, there's,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
so,
perfect.
when I read it, I look at it from the zoning lens, but there are a lot of,
So that's what I would, well, I don't normally get zoning from public health. But I could, certain districts, are we talking? You could have an elder care facility within a residential neighborhood, or you could have childcare within, which is, as the city actually exists. I don't know. I know there's daycares all over because there's children all over.
right, but you usually, so we have, at a certain threshold, you can have a home daycare, but beyond that, it's conditional use permit. And so it's just, when you create those zoning regulations, you're creating barriers or just hurdles people have to get over to provide that service. So are there things we need to be looking at in terms of zoning code, for example? That's one thing that I look at. But what other actions the city could take, I don't know that there's a whole lot.
Great, thank you.
So removing a barrier, maybe changing some of those zoning rules,
Right.
because I think we've had a couple of CUP requests just this last year for daycares or, you know, younger people watching stuff, whatever. But it was kind of, I did wonder, especially the first one we saw, which was a facility that's been in use for over 30 years, that they had to come and do it over again, which they had some kind of remodel or something like that, right?
I think they expanded.
Yeah, so I could see that as being a barrier, like being a business owner and knowing that I may have to do something like that when it's gonna be approved, it's gonna go through. And I've already been doing that kind of activity. The CUP process is like, I get it both ways, but that could be a barrier, like, but we can't just have like childcare zoning parts of town, or I don't know, maybe we could. Maybe that would encourage them because it seems like it's a big need to have, like, childcare seems like it's a big issue in the community. So.
But the flip side of that is they do create impacts, like a home daycare, or like we think of the Montessori, we put some conditions on that because it wasn't maybe the ideal site, but for the number of kids they were going to have, it was probably okay. But so it's both sides of why you have CUP and why you want to look at things more closely. But again, if we know it's a drastic need in the community, should we be looking at our regulations to make it easier to do? Okay. Responsive government, the participation of community members in civic affairs is valued and representative. Continually improve governmental outreach and engagement of citizens and businesses. Facilitate open, inclusive, and respectful public participation and engagement with all community members in proactive planning projects and the development review process to foster better decision-making and an informed community. Ensure equitable, reliable access to all city programs, services, facilities, and other assets. Continuously improve the overall performance and cost efficiency of city government, and explore opportunities to improve outcomes through intergovernmental cooperation.
Can we move D to the very top?
Move D to the
Make
2A.
Make DA
Yes,
for emphasis.
as a thought.
Makes sense. And I have a question on C, current C at least. And that is if the city wanted to, is it included in C that if the city wanted to eliminate payment, right? I mean, for some of the services that we provide through Parks and Recreation and other agencies. Is there a way that, would that be included in there that the city could say, we'll have tuition free for low income people to participate in our football programs, our basketball programs, or whatever?
That's a
Is
current-
that already in there?
That's a current practice.
Is it?
It
I
is.
mean, because I haven't ever seen it publicized. But if it is, then
I
we're
can, I
good.
can speak
So it's there.
from Parks Direct. That is a
Then
current
don't worry
for
about it. Yep.
only the last 23 years.
Okay, so it's relatively new.
Well, and that the action could be, explore additional scholarship programs for recreation providers.
If we think it's in there adequately, I don't then think we don't need to do anything.
I can just speak to that one
covered.
exceptionally
It's covered.
specifically.
It's covered. Okay,
That is a practice, a long-term practice of the city of Sandpoint.
Yeah, I could also back that up.
Okay.
The city sometimes goes to too far of lengths to make everything equal. Although the school programs get
that's,
a little more of an edge on access, only when there's a conflict of timing. But typically, that's not even an issue.
okay,
Um,
that's not an issue.
Yeah, and the city has very good facilities, so. And they don't charge enough. I can't believe I said that, but I mean, it is pretty affordable for.
I agree.
What the facilities are. So C doesn't need to be in there, I don't think.
Okay,
Okay, so
But I mean,
do
it's-
anybody
decide-
else?
Well,
I mean, it's kind of, I think it's somehow C is. It's just reiterating something that's already done, so there's no
Okay.
problem with that.
then we're good.
Okay. Did Commissioner Boyd, did you have any comments on this chapter? No.
Okay.
Okay, then we will move on to chapter 5, housing and neighborhoods. Again, this provides data on, some of it is census data, pulled from census data. There's some information here pulled from the Leland report, and then just some city permitting data on permit, residential starts. The data on housing demand. That the demand for short-term vacation rentals has been increasing, as we all know. The discussion of affordability and cost of housing to incomes. And then just the housing supply, what is the kind of housing that we have historically, what has been built in recent years. And then just the discussion of infill. A lot of this information was pulled from the materials at the workshop. And then just a update. I am told the survey will go live no later than early next week. So any information, we'll get a summary of the survey. It probably will go up for 2 weeks. It's the same information that was at the workshops, just put in a survey format. So that if anything comes back drastically with different trends, we'll revisit this, but we'll get you the results of the survey when it's available. Again, the popularity of ADUs and just that neighborhoods are more than housing. They are the parks that tie them together, the sidewalks, what people consider their neighborhood is, other than South Sandpoint, that's really the only really frequently referred to neighborhood that I hear. If there were, what would, so do people in Sandpoint think of themselves first as Sandpoint residents or residents of a specific neighborhood?
Good point.
Sandpoint residents.
So, which, given a community this size, is not unusual. So then goals and objectives.
I get to ask the first question under goals and objectives.
What's that?
What is a stacked flat?
A stacked flat is, it's a house on top of, it's a two flat.
Okay,
Instead of
So the
instead of the
European
units being
concept.
next to each other, they're on
Uh-huh.
top of each other.
okay.
Yeah, that's kind of, yeah,
So it's a
It's an
vertical duplex.
sorry.
It's a condominium.
It-
Is that not what a
Well,
condominium
I
is?
think what I hear you saying is it's a full living unit. They're just on top of each other. So two
Correct.
kitchens,
Yes,
well, and I don't know what access would be, but
But it's not unstackable.
unstackable.
typically the stairwell would go, either one unit would access the back. go
Two
upstairs.
single family residences on top of it.
Correct.
Top of each other.
Yep.
Vertical
I was
duplex.
just curious. I
Yeah,
read
I
that. I
know.
was like,
Yeah.
Okay, so housing variety. Goal, a variety of housing types is available to serve a broad spectrum of lifestyles and age groups. Pursue diversity in housing types by permitting detached, duplex, townhouse, stacked flats, accessory dwelling units, co-housing, co-living, cottage communities, and other types as appropriate in neighborhoods. Encourage housing above retail and mixed use in commercial centers. Work with housing providers that create housing options to meet the accessibility and functional needs of households with seniors and residents with special needs. Encourage development of attached housing types in and around downtown. Encourage development of single-family housing on small parcels, i.e. less than 5,000 square feet within traditional and medium-density neighborhoods. Housing affordability. The goal is housing is available to meet the needs of low and moderate income households. Identify and resolve barriers that impede the development of workforce housing and the rehabilitation of existing housing. Encourage transit stops and social services in proximity to workforce housing through density bonuses and zoning commercial employment areas. Integrate workforce housing into mixed income neighborhoods to reduce segregation and concentration of poverty.
can we pause there for a second?
Yep.
Do we really have a significant number of transit stops?
We don't have a significant number, but we do have some
We have some.
Oh, yeah.
bus stops.
Mm-hmm.
They're not full, there aren't any fully blown bus stops. They're just, on the side of the road.
But, they're appropriately spaced. They're by the schools, so they're by the shopping areas. They're appropriately spaced. And I think I've heard tell they will be adding a stop by the new Schweitzer housing whenever it's ready. So things like that.
Density bonuses, do we have density bonuses that are currently in practice? Or is this kind of leaning forward into it?
PUD density bonus for.
So we're
Yeah, you
Open
could offer it
space.
So,
through,
through design standards is kind of what or
I think the only place I know of it is our PUD code offers a density bonus when
Right.
open space is committed to a certain level of open space.
but our density, like in commercial districts, there's not a density limit. It's like you can build within this box and however many units and have enough parking, you can do it. So, but you could, sometimes you offer density bonuses to encourage affordable housing. So if there was a limit,
But we don't have any code provisions for that.
Right, we don't. Yeah, this is just saying, where is it? It's saying consider it, right?
Yeah. So if given the opportunity, we could do code amendments to allow.
Yeah.
for-
So it's encouraging it for the council to consider moving in that direction if they choose.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Up above on D, it says encourage development of attached housing types in and around downtown. So what is around downtown? Is that,
It would probably be on the periphery of downtown. But that's something, and that's something I think we're going to be discussing through the future land use map. And what is our current downtown boundary? And is that really the area because your downtown, well, actually, all your commercial districts are pretty generous in terms of building footprints, building heights. And it may be that in the downtown core, that makes sense, or in a part of downtown, and maybe downtown, no, is the granary district downtown, or is the granary district, a different district? Right now, it's in your downtown zoning wise. So those are all the discussions through land use that we'll have to be talking about.
And I think that's a good point. There will become a more evolved definition of around downtown.
yeah, because in the commercial area is attached housing really? That, how does that make sense?
Well, multifamily is attached housing.
Okay,
It is kind of strange they call it attached, but you think of attached as attached single family, like a townhouse being attached, or a duplex is an attached single family too. It just is.
I think it's also to support letter B, which is encourage housing above retail and mixed use and commercial centers. So it's also that concept of supporting residential and commercial and a mixed use opportunity.
noted.
I think it's getting allow density close to your downtown so that your downtown has that residential.
Yeah,
The users are right there to support your commercial.
well, it makes sense for downtown to be the most dense, most active, and then as you get away from downtown, it becomes more single family, wider spread out type housing. Okay, I'm good.
Amy, I have a question, if you can hear me.
Yep.
The incentives you talked about for ADUs, is that going to be in the implementation part of the comp plan, or?
Yeah, that would be an implementation tool.
Okay. That was it.
Okay.
She's not making
Thank you.
I know, it sounded perfect.
Okay. Were we on existing neighborhoods?
Pardon?
Where were we?
housing affordability.
Housing affordability?
Those
Okay.
magic buzzwords.
Let's see. So we talked about transit stops, integrating workforce, housing into mixed income neighborhoods, coordinate regionally on housing strategies for low and moderate income populations through a housing authority or other mechanism. This is discussed again in the Leland report that the market is not going to solve the affordable housing. It's going to have to be a government-driven.
A public-private partnership sort of thing. Housing authority.
Educate local employers and other organizations about market solutions for the creation of workforce housing. Chairman Hastings, I think you were the one that had brought up, I don't know if it was under economic development, about having something in the plan about encouraging employers to provide housing for their workers. And I don't know if this is getting at that clearly
I
enough.
think it is. I think it is.
Okay.
Although
Um,
the only thing, well, and perhaps the only thing and I know it's a big deal, the word market kind of takes some of the meat out of that because market forces aren't going to do it.
Right.
So
So you're suggesting strike the word market?
well, you'd have to do more massaging in that sentence than just taking that word out, but something like that. About,
Just take out
If you
market.
take out.
I guess
market,
it's
at least
okay.
Then you open it up.
I
to
guess
all
it's okay.
sorts.
Yep. Scratch market. We're good.
Um, Existing neighborhoods. The charm and comfort of Sandpoint's existing neighborhoods is protected and enhanced. Protect the residential character of existing neighborhoods by providing for transitional buffers between residential, commercial, and industrial uses, such as alleys, fences, or natural areas. Support the formation of active neighborhood organizations to advocate for the needs and improvements of existing neighborhoods. Continue to manage short-term rentals to mitigate adverse impacts on year-round residential neighborhoods. Encourage public and private investment in Sandpoint's existing neighborhoods. Maintain the historic architectural integrity of neighborhoods and improve and expand pedestrian infrastructure.
I have a question. There's three more. Is E, maintaining the historic architectural integrity of the neighborhoods, are we primarily suggesting through such mechanisms as design standards? And would that be in conflict of A with housing variety? Or, I mean, I'm just curious, how do we execute that?
It probably would be coming up with, it could be design standards, it could be design requirement, if a historic, creating historic districts, and if you create a historic district, there might be additional review for buildings in that district. So the creation of a historic district for X neighborhood could be an implementation tool.
I'm just curious because there's some stuff that's old and it should maybe just go away.
I concur. Yeah.
Trying to be civil.
Talking about my house?
Yeah.
I live in one of those too. I'm just curious. What does that mean? I'm always curious.
Well, when it gets to a historic district, they'll come up, they usually will come up with what are the structures we're really trying to protect? And what are the ones that may just be in the district that aren't really contributing to the district?
It reminds me of the historic bridge that is south of town that they specifically made sure was taken out near Clark Fork because that was found to be historic. One person's history is another person's eyesore.
Liability.
Public safety has it.
All of the above, yes. So, thank you.
Quick question for discussion, not necessarily advocating, but on C. And because we're still on this page, even though I know there's still some other bullets, but continue to manage short-term rentals. Does anybody think we need a stronger word there? Continue to regulate short-term? I know regulates.
Continue to
Loaded
regulate
word.
instead of
Given the
manage.
statute, you don't want to put regulate.
Thank you. Okay,
Oh,
gotcha,
so we should
I
do
just
manage.
leave it.
Manage is a
Manage.
smart word.
gotcha.
Good fun this here. I would have said, yeah, that's all.
Takes a village, man.
Okay, so still on existing neighborhoods, ensure new housing types are appropriately scaled within the neighborhood in which they are developed. Allow home businesses that maintain residential character and implement the urban forest management plan to maintain and enhance neighborhood tree canopies. New neighborhoods?
Is there any, I may have missed it, but is there anything in there about the last part about allow home businesses that maintain residential character? Is there and you may have touched on it with the land use map. Is there like the residential business mixture that isn't quite like a mixed use, but it's more encouraging for home businesses, but not full blown commercial?
Right, you can allow, for example, home businesses in any single family district. Our current code is super restrictive. I mean, our code doesn't allow you to have anyone come to your house. Now, are people doing it? Probably, but you know, you could allow home businesses that allow, you know, I mean, people work from their home and have UPS dropping stuff off every day, or maybe they don't even work from home. So there's parameters you can put on it. Maybe you only are, you know, and you can't have signage. It always have to look residential, but you maybe allow a limited amount of commercial activity of people coming to your house. That's not gonna upset the neighbors.
I mean,
So it's a way to, there's a way you could do it just in a residential district.
Yeah, so I mean, if people are living there and it looks like a house, I feel like they should have the ability to do a fair amount, as long as it's not making the neighbors, you know, hindering their activity, like with the CUP with the daycare, that kind of stuff.
And volume of traffic on the street. I mean, all of those would be taken into consideration.
And I mean, a potential problem too is if they had a small manufacturing facility in there, and so now they've got 4 or 5 employees that park their cars on the street to come to work. That's the sort of thing that would want to be avoided.
Then it's lost its
Yeah, it's not.
Residential character,
residential character.
even
Yeah.
if they're still living there, it's lost the residential.
Yeah,
character.
that's a general requirement, is only people that live in the house can operate the business.
Gotcha.
Or maybe one, you know, we'd have to come up with what it is. Sometimes you are allowed one non-family
Gotcha.
employee.
But
But
compare that to a low impact, like during COVID, a counselor, for instance, could easily work at home and counsel people at their kitchen table, would have 0 impact on the neighborhood, still maintain its residential character, but technically running a business out of their home.
Yeah, because the fear I have is that only commercial activity in commercial zone or mixed zone makes it to where you have to purchase or rent this, maybe expensive or maybe not, or maybe you have to follow all these other regulations for a pretty minor amount of activity, like office space, for instance, which, you know, most homes would not affect, like even a law office that was one person, or you know, many other things, counselors, like you said, that kind of thing should be on the table without it having to have a conditional use permit or.
And I would say that given the restrictive nature of your current code, this age is probably reflective of your community speaking and saying, hey, we just came through COVID where a lot of people had to work from home and we did it well and it had very little impact on our neighborhood. We'd like in our vision document, our comprehensive plan, to start in our goals working towards allowing more business opportunity in our residences. I mean, that's exactly where a goal like that comes from, is your community speaking out.
Yeah, and with the ADUs, we've kind of allowed, you know, I mean, ADU probably is a business, or could be, or, you know, somebody's charging rent, so essentially it's extra traffic, and so I mean, that falls into that, which, I mean, that's been acceptable. And I do think it allows people to use their property more, which overall I think is a good thing.
So the nice thing is, let's just say this chapter is adopted the way it's written. And that's what gives your council the opportunity to come back and say, we need to look at some code changes because our vision document is a reflection of what the community wants, and we're not quite in alignment with that.
Good.
new neighborhoods, new neighborhood developments are aligned with resident needs and community values. Encourage a portion of new housing development to emulate historical neighborhoods, including a variety of housing, alleys, and traditional gridded blocks. Where cul-de-sacs are allowed, they must provide for continuous non-motorized connections between streets. Connect neighborhood services, public open space, and parks with sidewalks and or multimodal paths. Develop a safe, appropriate street system network that provides easy access but does not allow rapid or high volume traffic to disrupt the new neighborhood. Allow live, work, and neighborhood serving retail at the edge of residential neighborhoods where appropriate to support walkability, and enhance neighborhood tree canopies.
So I'm curious why we would specifically call out private-public partnerships in existing neighborhoods, and we wouldn't call it out in new neighborhoods.
Why, what we did call it out in existence?
We call it out in existing, but we don't. Should it be called out in both if it's?
Oh, encourage public and private investment in Sandpoint's existing neighborhoods. I don't know if that's getting at, you know, if you have an old neighborhood and the houses need a lot of rehab, there's government programs to get the money to the residents. I don't know if that's what.
And or the opportunity for urban renewal.
But it could also be perceived that if you're encouraging public partnerships, that might be considering the affordable housing option as a perspective.
Right.
So I would, are you suggesting to add it?
I'm suggesting to add it.
I agree.
I agree as well.
Into new neighborhoods as
Yeah.
well. Okay.
Mhm.
That could be exact same bullet point, but put it down there as well.
Yeah.
So it would say encourage public and private investment in
New neighborhoods.
Sandpoint neighborhoods.
Right.
Right.
Excellent.
And I think that, kind of goes back to the Leland report. It talks about lowering regulatory barriers, community land trust is an option, working with local governments.
Okay.
So there's that traditional gridded blocks.
I looked at you when she read it because I was waiting for your.
I even got it in my notes.
What's our
here, the
time?
Things to cover.
Well, I was,
This is an allowance for cul-de-sacs right there. There's
but
a
I was told I
cul-de-sac.
couldn't have an alley previously by someone. It was you. I didn't ask for it because of you. You said I couldn't.
You should not have
Well, you
it.
said I could, but then I would be sued. More, we would be sued.
I think it was a broader conversation.
It
than
was,
that.
but it was here. I like alleys. I love alleys. But we aren't gonna, it's not gonna happen in code, I don't think, which is too bad. But anyways, I
I
like
think you had
grids.
raised a question on Boyer Farms, phase 2.
Can we impose?
no, I just asked.
So actually,
right, answer is
University
no.
Place, I think,
I know.
has at least one block with alley.
Interesting.
So, I mean, if it's truly,
It's just,
I mean, the funny thing about it to me is that we have this in here and we have all these unimproved alleys around town
Right.
that they're kind of used, but they're also used for storing stuff and, they're not truly functioning how one would anticipate a grid.
But a lot of them are.
A lot
I
of
know
them
when
are
I'm doing
legal.
landscaping and delivering plants and such, they say, don't come to the front, use the alley.
Hmm.
And they're very, there's some very well-used
How's it
alleys too.
driving down those?
Fine and dandy with a truck, even with a truck. Yeah.
But the,
Well, some are really good. Some are perfect and others are just like on my block. You can tell that at some point there probably was an alley, but everybody's just built, through it.
it's an alley on your block?
Well, there isn't, but there's a
Used to be.
weird piece
there's
of
two
property on
computers
the north side of the block
Okay.
where there's a house that looks like it's on an alley.
Hmm.
But then the rest of the block, there, all the property lines meet in the back. But the block south has an alley and the block south of that does too, and just about every other block. But I mean, my thing is, how is this even possible with a gridded street pattern with with what developers want and what people want and affordability and everything. The gridded thing is just like,
Let me,
all the development happens on like 5-acre pieces of ground that just,
Infill development.
there's just not enough space. Like the biggest development we're ever gonna have couldn't even do it. We didn't even force them to do it.
Well, that and our current alleys don't need fire access. So, you know, are we gonna make alleys be 26 feet to meet that?
Well, especially when you have snow storage issues.
Right.
The beauty of this section here, and even if you wanted to add to it, is this is what your planning team needs when an applicant comes in and they start those pre-development meetings, and these guys need to be able to point them back to the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. And is the project that they're considering going to be consistent with what the goals of the comprehensive plan are? This is exactly the section they're going to go to.
a question, if I may, and that is the reason that so much of the recent development, almost all that we've seen, doesn't have gridded streets. Is that because the developers don't want it, or the developers perceive that the consumer doesn't want it?
Well, a lot of what you've seen as your infill development could not have physically put in. a
Because of
grid
room,
pattern.
or because of existing
Because of
streets,
location,
existing.
because of
Size.
Yeah.
The size and location and the existing streets around it.
Yeah.
But I'm curious if the consumer doesn't want that.
I would argue that maybe there is a transition, the consumer does want that they are looking for a smaller footprint with a smaller home with more open amenity spaces around them, right? You're seeing this, I think Culver's Crossing might be a good example of that kind of differing single family residence with multifamily residences mixed within those communities. But I think that the code requirements are driving this like exorbitant cost of now you have to build an alleyway that is basically a street versus an alleyway because of code requirements. And so it becomes cost prohibitive.
That's fire code, not city code.
Yeah, I was just more curious than advocating anything.
Although there is also a trend towards called New Urbanist Development, and they very much are trying to get back to gridded streets with alleys, and so that, but I think most people want the attached garage. And if
But
your garage is back on your alley, it's probably not attached to your house, or it might be, but
I know when you see real estate ads, a common plus is on a cul-de-sac, as if that's a selling feature.
Hmm.
People want cul-de-sacs because then they know there's not traffic.
Especially families with small children.
Yep.
But with the change, potentially with what ACIs, the growth patterns, the lifespan of this document. I love grids. I live on a gridded street. I think we should keep it. We should encourage it. It's a hope.
Should be encouraged where it's possible.
Yes.
Correct.
And if we were to do an entire PUD to the west, there is room to the west. The current landowners aren't prepared to sell it, but
My beef with this is the word encourage. It has no teeth at all,
It's a goal.
but
it's a plan.
but this is what we've been battling since I first started here, is there is no way to enforce it when it is possible that I can see.
Well,
And we just had like a 70-acre development essentially happen where that was a perfect opportunity for it. And frankly, they got away with murder. And we had the opportunity to do that. And a lot of us voiced our concern that that was one of the things that was not appealing about it. I mean, glaringly not appealing on top of other things. And it went through. So my thing is like, it either needs to not be in there or it needs to have wording that makes it more than encourage or some sort of benefit to the developer, which is probably where it needs to be. what does the developer get out of doing a grid pattern? I mean, people are gonna buy the property either way, probably. And after all the property is sold, nobody cares, it's there. But what's the benefit of the grid pattern and what is the benefit to the developer or to the rest of the city? And I don't know those answers.
Well, I mean, it's getting back to that question of density bonuses. If you really want it,
Mhm.
then you're right, encourages them not, because having one goal that says this, when someone comes in for a rezone, they can find 5 goals that support what they're doing. So maybe it's something like consider incentives to create neighborhoods that follow historic patterns, including alleys. So that you can have smaller lot sizes, or you could have, I don't know, what else, because we're pretty liberal in most. Your building heights are high for single family homes, but that's something we could look at, because then that's giving us direction to put it in code. And that's the only, to your point, if it's not in the code, it's really hard to enforce. But
Yeah,
if it is something that, consider incentivizing developments to follow historical patterns.
yeah, I like that. I mean, especially if it's something that is appealing to developers, and maybe, I mean, where it's gonna hit them is what does it cost? Or what's the end goal that they're seeing as far as, is it gonna sell better? Are they gonna get higher density or,
Or
Some-
less street work, perhaps,
yeah, or smaller streets
This might be
or
more street
smaller,
work.
maybe the right of way sidewalk, curb to sidewalk distance is different, closer to commercial. Well, not commercial, but setbacks maybe, because I think those are the things that,
A different set of setbacks. But
well, I'm just saying, because the difference between, like, I was alarmed to know that commercial, you can build to the property line. And that's a pretty big difference from 3 blocks over where you have a very drastic difference in setback. So maybe it's not, the residential setback or maybe mixed use, or does mixed use have that same setback? With the,
mixed use has setbacks.
Right.
and then like,
Mixed use residential does.
all right. Well, something that gets us there, that is favorable to us and to, the developers, I think. And I think it will look better,
I think Amy just said it. You could just simply change the first little bit of that to consider incentivizing new housing development to emulate historical neighborhoods, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Works for me.
I died on this.
Go ahead, Amelia.
Your claim.
I was just wondering in A, what is the reason or the justification that if their cul-de-sacs are allowed, they must provide for continuous non-motorized connection between streets? So if there's a cul-de-sac and there's a street behind the cul-de-sac, does that mean there needs to be a path or something to connect the two? Is that what that means?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's creating at least connectivity for pedestrians or non-motorized where you don't have it for vehicles.
Okay, I was just wondering historically why, that was in there. That's all.
Yeah, that's my understanding, is to provide connectivity for non-motorized that does not exist for vehicles. So if you live at the end of the cul-de-sac, you don't have to go walk down the cul-de-sac and down the street and all the way around to get to the cul-de-sac that was just across somebody's lot or something.
Right. Got it. Thank you.
Okay. So that's where we are with that. And as I said, once we have the survey results, I will get you those, and then we will also, any updates needed to this chapter will get incorporated.
I have a question, and that is, I noticed in the housing report, so not in this, but in the housing report, that it frequently came out in there, changing the heights of buildings we allow. 4, 5, and even 6 stories is something that it said in a couple different places. Which in the right neighborhood, where would that be? I mean, if that was something that we were to look at doing, it's nowhere in the document we just reviewed. Where would it be if we were to allow that? And I guess, and my concern is if we were to allow taller buildings, there ought to be some areas that we say right up front, it's not allowed here, whatever that here is, but there should be some places where a 6-story building would be terribly inappropriate. Even a 4-story building.
And that could be fleshed out somewhat through the land use map, but it would be more fleshed out once you get to zoning. So what is your zoning districts and what are the allowances you have? Because right now in your commercial A, which is downtown, you're allowed 65 feet if you have upper floor residential or at grade, a parking structure incorporated into the building. I think the commercial B, it may also be 65 feet.
Which is,
because,
what does that usually translate into as far as what we would consider a 4-story building? Is that 65?
Would be closer to a 5-story building.
Closer to a 5-story building.
Yep.
But with parking on one of those, or parking on a whole level, or?
Right.
Okay, so I mean, they're getting their 4 residential, and then that's commercial on street level? Like retail?
It depends. I mean, I think the code talks about it. You could have a ground floor on, if you can get it below grade, great, but you're probably running into water, so you may not want to do that. So yeah, it would most it could be multiple levels of structured parking.
Yeah, there's been some community input as far as the project on Bridge Street. And so in that particular case, is it 65 feet from beginning of the structure or 65 from street level, which is above the grade of where the structure will start? So where's the 65 measured from?
Your height is from front elevation. I'm not sure. We may average to the 2 street sides if one has a slope, but then it's to the top. If it's top of a peak or top of a parapet, it's the highest point of the building is the 65 feet.
Pretty
That's
tall.
what's currently allowed, which is,
Pretty tall. I think that's taller than anything currently.
I think the Columbia Bank building, that may not be 65 feet, but I think it's within the 50s. And that, I believe that was approved under a CUP.
Yeah, they were going to go taller too, so there was some restriction placed on that. They initially wanted it to be taller than what it is. It may still have been an exception to get it as tall as it is, but.
Yeah, that one took a long time to happen because of that height.
Mhm.
I thought that,
And they lowered what they originally wanted.
was the rationale for that height thing originally? I had heard that it was fire code. There was a firefighting thing. We didn't have the equipment to fight fire higher than that. Is that an accurate?
I know we have equipment to reach 65 feet. Do we have a 100-foot ladder? We may have a 100-foot ladder. I'm not entirely sure.
So if that was a thing, it no longer is, at least, but yeah.
Right.
Now it's just aesthetic or blocking view or
Now it's more about
sunlight or
view shed,
whatever.
view shed.
Sunlight.
Well, and even preserving historic. Because I know the community does not want to see a canyon made of First Avenue.
Yeah, but the community wants affordable housing.
That's not going to help with affordable housing at all.
I mean, like you said, one part of the code says one thing, the other part says another. And
We
the
have many, many
community,
goals. And they
And-
don't always.
and
the community
even
wants
they
on one
sometimes
hand
conflict.
and they want the same
Right.
opposite together, not the same on the other hand.
It's true.
I have a question on the survey. Can you, the survey will be coming out when?
I
And
am hopeful that it will be posted no later than Monday.
posted on city?
It'll be on the city website, the Facebook page, and Engage Sandpoint.
Can we be notified of that as a
Yes.
group?
Yep. I will
Okay.
let you know when it is posted.
And then earlier you mentioned a presentation tomorrow. Is that here?
Yes, it's for city
City
council.
meeting.
Okay,
It's, we did a joint meeting, didn't we, when Leland presented the first time? It's
Mhm.
just the final, because
It-
they made some data changes and added, I think, some more information.
And it's a presentation, not an action item, correct?
Correct. Although I think council is adopting it, or they're being asked to adopt it.
Do we have an amended written report on that? On the changes?
Like, do they spell out what the changes are? I don't think so.
Or did they amend anything that was in their previous written report?
Yes, they have a
Oh,
revised report.
That's what, can I get a copy of that?
Yep.
please?
Yep.
yeah, I'd like copies too.
It's actually in the
Is it in the
packet.
packet for tomorrow night?
Oh,
Council
okay.
packet.
Oh,
But
I
But
got it.
can
I got
send
it.
you the link.
Is
I
it
can
different
get
than
it.
what you emailed us yesterday?
Oh, that's
Did I send you the link?
Mhm.
I'm
Or did I
looking,
send you a report?
I'm looking at the 69-page report right now.
Oh, okay. Then I sent it to you.
Yes.
Good job.
I didn't even remember doing it.
Well, I think most of us are on the city council packet thing too, so I just remember that. So my bad.
It's a very long agenda. There's a lot of items tomorrow night. So,
Do you yield the floor back to me? Commissioners, any other questions, comments?
I think we should thank Commissioner Ahmet for his short
Oh,
service
yeah.
here for the city of
1 year,
Sandpoint.
1
Oh,
year.
But it
You
was
have to leave. You have
Meaningful.
to leave us.
I will
We
be
chose to.
traveling a half mile that way.
Gotcha.
Yes. I will still reside in the city.
Yeah, I would reiterate that. It's been a pleasure having you here, and when you get sick of the other job, you come back. You'll be welcome.
Thank you.
So I expect that by March.
That's right.
Thank you. I appreciate your confidence, Commissioner Dunkel.
All right, with no further business, this meeting is now adjourned at 6:57.
Amelia.
I was cold.
oh, you were cold. We just thought you were anxious.
I'll see you guys. I'll see y'all next year.
All righty.
Well,